Hey everybody, Aaron Cowan, Sage Dynamics, and this is my review of the Stribog SP9A3G. That name just keeps getting longer. They announced this, this filmed in 2022, they announced this early 2022. Probably some people knew about it before then. I wasn't going to be one of those people. The enhancements and improvements to the SP9A3, which arguably was an improvement on the SP9A1. The biggest thing that people were looking for when they got the A3 was the non-reciprocating charging handle. That was a big selling point for a lot of people, which I kind of get, but also I don't. Like, I don't mind if a firearm like a rifle or an SMG or a PCC has a reciprocating charging handle, because all my handguns have reciprocating slides. So I've already kind of learned, like with certain firearms, you have to put your hands in certain places so they don't get bit. But for some people, they're just like, they can't bear the thought of a reciprocating charging handle. So it's cool that they came up with a version that doesn't have it for those people that's a concern of theirs. And all things being considered, for being fair, it shouldn't. If you can design it that way, you should, just to minimize the amount of moving parts that are going to exist in relationship to where people are going to put their hands. If you remember my review of the SP9A3, didn't go great. So this was kind of a second chance. Now, people told me on the SP9A3, not this one, the one I first reviewed, they're like, well, you know, they got curved mags. And I'm like, I shouldn't need a curved mag to fix the problems that I had. I feel like that should have been fixed by the guys that call themselves engineers before the firearm ever made it to market. Because sometimes engineers think something's going to work because they don't envision or use it in ways that the user is actually going to use it. So it's just a common problem that doesn't exist only in the firearms world. But I was actually kind of excited about this, and I want every gun to be good. I don't review things hoping they're going to suck. But sometimes they do, and if they do, I'm going to tell you about it. This particular one I got, takes Glock magazines, hence the G on the end of an increasingly long name. Glock mags are very popular with PCCs because of, well, the overall inexpensive cost of a Glock mag versus some of the other magazines that are out there, and they're just everywhere. The world is almost at this point covered in Glock magazines, so you can easily have a Glock magazine. Strangely enough, it doesn't come with Glock magazines. It comes with KCI magazines, 33 round stick mags. You can also, of course, get Glock pattern drums, and you can run 15 rounders, 17 rounders, 22 rounders, 24 rounders, 33 rounders, whatever Glock mag starting at the 15 round Glock mag length you want, and going on up from there. Otherwise, the features seemed very similar to the A3. I've got the folding stock. I've got a non-reciprocating reversible charging handle. I've got ambi safety selector, ambi bolt release, ambi magazine release. So I've got everything going for me to kind of create a very good starting off point for a good PCC, and of course a threaded barrel for suppressed use. If you thread a barrel, I'm going to put a suppressor on a firearm, but we'll get to that. I got mine as a pistol, SBR'd it, and mounted an HBI adapter with a Zukov stock. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Magpul stock. Those are two important details that will matter a lot very soon. My first 500 rounds, just getting a feel for it, I did have a couple of malfunctions, but that could be just, you know, the guns breaking in, whatever. Most people, you know, I've mentioned this in videos in the past, but I feel like it's worth mentioning it here. I do disassemble, oil, and reassemble everything before I start a review process. Because any firearm that's going to run for 2,000 rounds without any kind of oil is probably got tolerances so loose I'm going to have bad things to say about it anyway. So everything was pre-treated, ready to go before the 2,000 round review started. First 500 rounds, like I said, just getting a feel for it. The trigger feels like a significant improvement. You think about just the overall features of the Stribog, the features of firearms in general, the trigger is one of the biggest selling points because it's the manipulation, the mechanism, if you will, that you spend the most time with. Like, you shoulder the gun, you're going to notice the weight as a constant. But when it comes to controls, the safety selector and the trigger, what you spend the most time with. Because in most cases, I got to pull that trigger a whole bunch of times before I ever have to work with the magazine release or the bolt release. So you just get more manipulations, you get more of an imprint on performance. The trigger feels more sure, it feels more crisp. These unquantifiable, or I should say intangible things that we notice, and everybody knows what I'm talking about when I say it, but it's really hard to put it in a factual basis. It's got a really consistent break from first to last round as the gun gets hot, and that's one thing that throughout the 2,000 round review process, the 2,000 rounds that I fired during the review, I definitely appreciated was the trigger seems to be a significant improvement over the trigger that came with my original SP9A3, which I believe was polymer. This one is not. It's got a profile change, just a little bit flatter, which I definitely appreciate. The rest of the controls felt pretty much the same. Charging handle or cocking handle, whatever you want to call it up front, performance was fine. There's an asterisk on that we'll get to. Safety selectors, it's ambi, and the ambi does tend to sweep down into your grip a little bit, so I feel it indexing on my palm right there at my index finger. I don't like that, but that's something obviously a user can correct with removing that side safety. Bolt release remains problematic. I feel like the shelf could come out a little bit further. It's workable, but I feel like if I'm inserting a magazine into a bolt-locked rear after shooting a magazine empty, mag comes out, mag goes in, I shouldn't have to manhandle that bolt release, and I shouldn't have to work a charging handle if a bolt release exists. So my advice to them would be to extend the shelf out a little bit, but I'm sure before they get around to it, the secondary market will come up with a solution for that, because these things are popular in certain circles and people are starting to produce aftermarket options for them beyond just stock adapters and brace adapters. So I had a couple hiccups. The hiccups were basically the bolt was just locking to the rear. Sometimes it would happen during a cycle of fire. Sometimes a magazine, I'd run a magazine clean, I'd insert a magazine and the bolt would not go forward. And this was really getting on my nerves, because I'm like, why? Like, we went through this with the last gun. Why are we doing this again? So it only happened a few times getting into the 500 round review process. 500 rounds as quickly as possible to see if that accelerated rate of fire will identify any issues that the same round count over a much longer period of time would not identify. So 3 to 4 minutes versus 3 to 4 hours, weeks, days, months. You know, same boilerplate I say in almost every video. Again, really? Finally. Burn down, I had multiple instances where the bolt just blocked to the rear, which caused a malfunction, kind of like a double feedy or a stovepipey type situation, depending on where we were at in the cycle of fire. Or I'd remove a magazine, put a new magazine in, and the bolt would not go forward. And it got to the point where I was having to disassemble the gun to get the bolt to go forward. But I did make it through the 500 rounds. It just took disassembling the gun twice to do it. Now, I know some of you are at home like, well, I knew it. I knew Stribog would just produce some nonsense again. And I was right there sitting next to you nodding along until I did some investigating. And I can actually blame this on the stock adapter, not the Stribog gun. The stock adapter was wearing, my actual recoil spring was wearing inside the stock adapter just the way it was designed. And I was surprised at this, because I've known HBI to make great stock adapters and great products in general. In this case, I was having enough, and this could be a tolerance issue, wear on that reciprocation that it actually seized up my recoil spring. It's now stuck in a compressed position. And I had to, well, in order to finish the 1,000 round review, take the stock off my old SP9A3 and put it on the new SP9A3G, including the spring. So I swapped parts from the SP9A3 into the SP9A3G and picked up right where I left off for the next 1,000 rounds. Is the gun whole? Yeah, it is. I just had to change out some parts because I had a third-party part cause an issue. I definitely can't attribute this to anything else, and I know, and there's a way I can, because for the next 1,000 rounds, it didn't happen again. So for the next 1,000 rounds, I didn't have those problems that had plagued the first 1,000 rounds, or had plagued the Stribog SP9A3 in my experience in the past. So everything ran pretty damn good. A lot of that 1,000 rounds was shot suppressed on subsonic, 147 grain subsonic, and 115, 124, just regular range ammunition, suppressed and unsuppressed, but mostly suppressed. I like to shoot suppressed as often as possible, even though I still wear ear pro. You know, hearing damage is cumulative, and it doesn't ever actually get better, so I shoot suppressed pretty much any chance I can get. This was no exception. And guns with this particular type of operating system either love to be suppressed or they hate to be suppressed. One thing I did like about the SP9A3 and continuing on to the SP9A3G, this latest iteration or improvement, if you will, on the SP9A3, is it definitely softens out a little bit when suppressed over some of the, you know, comparable PCCs in that category. Or shooting this thing unsuppressed, then shooting it suppressed, you definitely notice a different behavior in the recoil pulse, which I can definitely appreciate. The gun just functions fine. I still had the occasional issue with that bolt release, but after I did the stock change, after I did the recoil spring change with that problem I had after the burn down, that next 1,000 rounds went great. The question, of course, people are going to ask is, what about accuracy? I didn't really have any big accuracy issues, I don't think, with my first run through the SP9A3, but we're not comparing the two. So I wasn't expecting accuracy issues to be with this one, but here's zeroed it at 25 yards using a primary arms prism, 124 grain gold dot. So here's a look at how it shot at the zero distance of 25 yards after my initial confirmation of zero. I feel like that's completely reasonable accuracy. Some people may want it to be a little tighter. I mean, yeah, it's possible, especially since this is a stock-fired weapon. But I think that's a completely reasonable shot group for what we're talking about. You think about barrel length, the actual caliber. I think that's really good accuracy. Now, I know the question is going to be asked. Because you identified the issue with the malfunctions being because of the stock adapter. And the next 1,000 rounds went great, as I said it did, because it did. Suppressed and suppressed, I got 1,000 rounds to this thing without a single problem. The question some people are going to ask is, well, does that mean you've changed your mind? And I'm like, I mean, standing on the merits of the gun, I'm going to keep shooting this thing to see if it's going to keep doing the right things. It is a good PCC. Now, I know somewhere in the comment section is going to be like, well, if you could only have one, which is a question I absolutely hate because I can always have more than one. Or where does it compare to the MP5 or the B&T or blah, blah, blah. You guys know I don't do comparison videos. I don't. And I generally don't, in certain situations, unless we're talking about a very specific topic, not a generality, answer questions like that. Because I can have more than one. Is it going to be better than the competition? That's up to you. I can tell you that it's not going to be my go-to PCC, however, it is a good PCC. That's about as honest as I can answer that question. I have no plans to get rid of it. Am I going to use it a lot? I don't know. Maybe. But it's not going to be if I'm just opening the safe and I'm like, hey, I need to grab an SMG or a PCC because I got to do some SMG or PCC type stuff at the range. This would not be the first one I would grab, but it would be a consideration to take with me. And it's something I'm probably going to use quite a bit for suppressor reviews and things like that. I'm not selling all my other SMGs and PCCs because this thing exists, but I'm more than happy to add it to the collection. I'm Eric Cowan with Sage Dynamics. Train accordingly.